Hello, I'm Chris, this is Gross Models. Welcome to another Star Wars diorama. This one is going to be, it's going to take a little while to do, but mainly because of waiting for things, not because it's a complex build. I'm only using one model in this. This is an X-Wing fighter, obviously, in 1/4 scale, as is my traditional diorama views. Now, you may notice this one's damaged. One of the guns is broken. I don't know what happened. They are very, very fine. It did break when I was building it and I glued it back on, but it's gone now. So I'm going to be using that as part of the build. I thought, how can I use an old X-Wing that's knackered and broken and actually broken? And I figured that I would continue my build from the new trilogy, the third trilogy, and have one from the second film in the new trilogy. Episode 8, not Rise of Skywalker, the one before that, one I can't remember of, but I'll put it across the bottom here as soon as I remember it, which was The Last Jedi. There it goes. So, X-Wing in The Last Jedi, you only see it for a very brief fraction of a second, and it's underwater. So, this is going to disguise the fact that it's broken. I'm going to be having this one submersed underwater on Ahch-to. I don't know how that's pronounced, but that's how I'm going to go with it. So this one is going to be a small base diorama, but it's going to have some height because I need some cliffs to it. So once again, with the paper, my thought on this is to have cliffside as a backdrop with obviously some sides to the cliff, water in the middle, so as some sort of watery pool type thing of a thickness. And in that, we're going to have the X-Wing submerged, with that wing being right at the bottom, under the sort of darker levels of the water, so you won't be able to see it. And then on the top, we're going to have some slight wave effect, and some background scenery to the cliffs. So the cliffs are going to have the little outcroppings and things on it, and it's going to be a little bit of grass here and there, that sort of thing. And I'm going to put some porgs on here. Now, you can't get 1/4 porgs because they're very, very small. 1/4 people are that big. So porgs are going to be a sort of less than half the size of that, sort of a quarter size of that knee height. So we're talking about porgs being about that big maximum. So you can't buy them as models. In theory, I could 3D print them, but my 3D printer can't handle detail to that scale. So what I've come up with is modelling. You may notice I have some craft modelling knives, and I've been playing around with building my own porgs. Obviously, I'm not going to do legs, anything like that. They're basically an egg-shaped thing with a little bit of shaping to it for some wings, which you can't see. I'm going to try and make a few of these and obviously paint them up so they look a little bit better. And I'll show you through how I'm going to be making those. I'll try and video it, but it's obviously very small, so I don't know that I'm going to be able to video it. I might just have to do a series of pictures. But that's going to be the sort of backdrop to that. A couple of other things I'm going to throw in there as well, if it works out, to lead us to the theory of the film and everything. One thing that I am intending to have is a stick. I'm going to have a stick there with Luke figure to one side, which Paul at Glued to the Sprue has printed for me. The scale's a little bit off, but I think I can get away with it. He's going to be standing on one side. The stick, you know, the one that you used to go from one side of the cliff to the other. It's not in exactly the same area. I'll have a cliff side on this side, I think. And he'll be sort of on the grassy sort of area that's going to be a little bit on the side there with the stick, just ready to progress across. So that'll add a little bit of height and interest. So the base only needs to be probably about this sort of size, actually, because we're going to have the X-Wing there at the edge of the water with the water underneath. It's going to be at an angle like that. And then we're going to have a cliff wall up here, a cliff wall up here with a bit of backdrop with porgs and things on it. And this is going to be another sort of cliff wall with a bit of grass at the top. That's my theory. We'll see how it actually progresses on. I haven't done any pre-building on this one at all, except for, as I say, a porg. it hopefully will look better. It looks better in my mind than it does already. So we'll see. What is going to take the time on this is the water. So my theory is to have some depth to this water. Now I'm going to use Mod Podge to do it like I did on the previous Scarif diorama, but I need to lay it in layers, and they need to be fairly thin layers, and it's going to take a couple of days for each layer to dry before I can do another thin layer, and then another thing, another thing. So it's going to take days and days and days and days and days and weeks to do the water. So first of all, I'm going to get the main backdrop done and sorted, so I can build up the base and start putting down some water while I'm tidying up the other, even painting the rest of the cliff back and things like that. So I'm going to start on that, made out of foam, and we'll see how that looks, and I'll start putting down some water, which obviously needs to go around the X-Wing. So yeah, let's see. Main thing first, then tiny detail. Okay, I've got some foam rough cut, just to give an idea. I've got some shapes to the edges. So the theory being, we've got 3 sides to a box that are going to go along here. Some foam core for the base there, so that's going to be sitting sort of there like that, with the sides to it. Now these other sides I'm going to have as layers to make it not dead straight, obviously. So we're going to do that like that. Probably another layer down there as well to make this a little bit smaller in there also. So that's the overall feel. The back, again, is going to have more mountainous sort of shapes to it and a little bit of depth. But that's the overall theory to begin with. I like to get a practical sort of feel for how it's coming together and starting to work. And that's a nice size. It's a much smaller die than the last one that I did, but it's more focused, as it's only one model, one kit in there, so that makes it work better, I think. We'll see how it goes. So I'm going to get these stuck together to give me a base to start on, and start adding some extra layers to create a little bit of depth and stepping, and obviously carving away some of the foam to give me something that looks a bit outcroppy. So I've got some little ledges so I can put porgs on them and things. Okay, so to create little ledges and things in there, I'm taking some of the offcuts of foam and basically slicing it carefully away from my fingers. And that gives me a fairly flat top surface area, a flat back, and an irregular front. So I'm just putting some PVA glue on the back of that. Here it comes out, there we go. PVA glue on the back of that, and then the whole thing just gets attached something like that. So I've built up a few bits down the bottom there. These are going to be basically underwater. Bits on the side, random areas. I'm just going to trim off some more of this and give a bit more shaping to the different areas, and then let it all dry, and then it will be time to get some clay on. I'm going to use some of the plaster that I used on various other dioramas to bed it all in, give me a surface that I can paint on as well, and that will create some more, it'll smooth some areas. I can make some more lumps and things on it. So I shall come back when I've got some clay, first layer of clay on, plaster, I should say plaster, because that's what it is. So I shall see you when that is ready. I've stuck some bits, cut some bits, and it's looking a little bit more like a rock face, but it's still not there yet. There's still a lot of wide open flat areas. Now, I'm going to be covering it in plaster, and that will enable me to put some more detail on there, but I thought there's one more thing I can do. A soldering iron. Now, this is obviously just going to melt. Grooves, scratches. I'm just going to basically scratch over to create some more crack-like details, so you can see in there it really just cuts it into nothing. I'm also going to use that to soften up some of these edges. Obviously where we've got square edges, that's going to be no good to us, so I'm just going to use this sparingly just to get rid of some of the bits that are a bit too uniform, too organic. So I'm just going to get rid of a couple of edges, tidy up a bit, put in a few more marks and lines as things go down. things like that. That's much too straight. So I'll do that and then start getting the plaster on. As you might guess, the first step in doing plastering is to mix up the plaster. So I'm using some what's called lightweight hydrocal plaster. Basically, it's just a plaster that's not very heavy, because I'm going to be using quite a lot of it. And this is the same stuff that I've been using for all of my previous diorama builds that have needed some plaster. So I'm basically just mixing up without trying not to splash it everywhere. Just mixing up plaster and water, plaster powder and water until it's all mixed in. I'll be needing to add a little bit more plaster into this, I think, because it's still very, very liquid. I want it a little bit heavier than that. It dries quite quickly. I think I've got about sort of 10 minutes of working time before it gets very, very thick. But obviously, getting thick is a good thing for this as well. So, yeah, I'm going to add a bit more plaster to this, mix it up, and then just start layering it over all of this. It's almost pouring at this stage. When it gets to later levels, I'm going to have to do 2 or 3 coats of this to build up to where I want it to be. When it gets to the later coats, I'll be able to add some texturing and shaping to it as well. But this is pretty much just covering and closing in all the plastic, filling in the gaps that I've got in places here as well. So it's going to look more like rock, because it's basically rock. So, yeah. So the first pour, I'm just pouring it in from above like this. This is obviously the back wall that you can see at the moment, but you can already see, just by moving it around, that a lot of it is sort of setting into grooves and things. So I'm not going to be able to film much of this, because it's going to mean just sort of shaking things around and moving things so you can't see them anyway. So when I've got a bit more done, I'll be able to show you how it looks. There we have the plastering completed. I think there's some gaps, but I'm hoping that the texturing of it will help and come out more when I get some paint on it. Next up is to get some paint on it. I'm going to use the matte black primer on this, because I think it will give better shadows. Certainly don't want to use gloss, because it's not the right sort of finish. But matte black primer, and then I'll get some grey over the top of it. But I'll be spraying the black, so I can't film that. So I shall do that and show you how it's going to look. I'm going to do all of it in grey, I think. At the bottom, I'm thinking I might use coloured Mod Podge to give the blue over the grey sort of rocky floor. So we'll see how it comes out and how it looks, and go from there. So painting, and then I'll come back to you. And there we have it, rather generously covered in black primer. I'm happy with how it's looking, actually. It's looking more like rock than it did when it had just plaster slapped over it. So now I'm going to go over it with some medium gunship grey, I've decided, as the grey tone for my rock. I'm not going to go over it very heavily. It needs some black shadowing and shading. So I'm going to try and pick out some directions to give it some shading. Again, airbrushing, can't show you, but I'll show you it when it's finished. For the water effect, I am going to use Mod Podge, and the bottom layer I'm going to have coloured. I'm going to put in some blue, because that's the colour water is traditionally used to be. I'm going to mix some up. Now, this is something that I've not done previously, but we'll see how it goes. I've mixed it in situ before, but this time I need to get it laid around in different places. So I'm going to use the rest of this Mod Podge that I have. I have another bottle for doing the rest of it, but this one I do need to get just a little bit of colour in. Now, previously I put in a drop of blue into a layer, and it's come out very, very dark. So this time I'm going to use a lot and put in a couple of drops. And that will do it, hopefully. We'll see. I'll get this mixed up, and you can see how the colour blends and changes into all of it. So I'm going to get this mixed up, and then we'll get to the pouring, and we'll see how it looks once it's on, and then once again, once it's dry. Well, we have the colours down. I'll put a little bit of blue down in the bottom there, just to give a little bit of depth, hopefully, to the water when it comes in. The black, I then put some grey over the top and some white and highlights, a couple of different greys. So I'm happy with how that comes out now, looking a bit rocky and cliffy. I need to get the water poured because it's going to take it ages for it to dry. So the glue that I've mixed up, the Mod Podge that I've mixed up with a little bit of blue in it, I hope is going to work. We'll see. But before I do that, there's one other important thing. We need to add the X-ring. Now, I'm not going to glue this in place because it's going to be completely under the water. So it doesn't need to be actually glued. Now, this is the one with, as you remember, the broken gun. So I'm going to put that at an angle, hopefully something like that. So the water you can not tell from there, but from here you can tell it's going to need quite a good depth. Actually, I don't like that angle. I'm going to move it around a bit and have it more over there. We'll have the wings shut as well, I think. I'm going to go more like that. So the first layer of water, hopefully a little bit blue. I'm not going to do it thick. That's the trick with this. You've got to go quite thin. So what I'm going to do is actually take that out and just pour in to the deepest parts of the build. Across the front there. And across the back. Something like that. So that I'm then going to manipulate around to get some coverage in all of the areas. I actually feel like I'm going to be adding some more to this as well. It's not quite enough. I think I underestimated the amount of area that I've actually got to cover on this. So that's that there. Let's just get a little bit of more poking in the back there. So I think that should do it. So what I'm going to do now is get the X-ring in. So it's got a little bit on and around it. Not so much on it, because this is obviously going to dry slightly blue. So I don't really want it to be covering any of the X-ring. But I do want to make sure it does get everywhere. And holds it in place. So that should be it, except for that little bit in the corner there I need to work over towards. There we go. So now I can put this away, except for the little bit down the front. Now a little bit of colouring shouldn't make any difference where I've got it on a couple of these bits of rock and things. But I don't want it everywhere. I do want to make sure I can see some depth through there. I might mix up another colour of the same to go the next layer, but that I'm now going to put aside for a day or two and leave it till it dries. There is one other thing that I forgot about for this dio that I need before the water sets, and that is Luke's stick for getting across to the other side, because I'm going to have Luke standing on one side, but I'm just going to use a barbecue skewer, which I have roughly sanded to make it less parallel, although that's probably not going to come out on camera or indeed in person. And I don't like the colour of it, so I'm just adding, instead of painting it, I'm sort of staining it with some mahogany Vallejo Air paint, which will just change the colour of it a bit and hopefully even enhance the sort of graining. And I've put a couple of cuts into the wood as well, just to change the shape of it a little bit, and I've shaped the tip a little bit as well. So yeah, once this is done, I shall insert it into the water in the right place, and I'll have to paint around the top bit of it, but that's not the end of the world. But I need to get this in before the water sets, because otherwise it wouldn't go in. I'd have to jab it in, and that'll affect the way the water sort of lays and sets. So yeah, just a quick bit of dyeing of the paint, make it look a little bit more natural, and then I shall insert it and we'll be away, and I can let the water dry as intended. And here you can see the Mod Podge is dried. I've used some resin as well, which I've done a different video for how to make resin, but I'll do the same thing again now as well. Now, here you have some water effects, which I have stained in blue. And then I used some more resin to stain it in a little bit less blue. Now I'm going to go for the transparent stuff. So I'm going to be mixing up another chunk of resin. I'm going to use the 2-part formula that I've been using before. I'm going to put a cup full of this into the bottle that I've been using to mix it up, and there's a little bit left on the bottom of the bottle that has dried anyway, so I'm obviously not going to be able to use my mixing bottle for anything other than this in the future anyway. So there we have some part A, which I can tip into here, scoop out all of the loveliness, or at least the vast majority of the loveliness, because it doesn't really matter, because I'm going to be using the same pot to put the part B in. So even if it does leave some residue in there, it will very soon mix up anyway. So that's part A. Put that down there. Get everything stuck to my oversized gloves that they provided. Part B, I shall put in a cupful. Glug, 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 glug. There we go. Now I might well end up using all of these bottles for this particular build, but it seems to be working. So I'm happy with my transition to the world of resin, to the grown-ups, instead of using the Mod Podge is fine for very small areas and very thin arrangements, but where this block needs to be, what are we talking, 2 or 3 centimeters, about an inch, maybe more deep, it just wasn't working. So that's the 2 mixed up in there. Well, that's the 2 in there. They're not mixed up in there yet. I need to do that now. That's what I'm doing with the stirring stick. Now, it might well still have a very slight blue tinge to it, because, let's say, some of the bit in the bottom might well still mix in. But we'll see. The level that's in there at the moment is still not fully hardened. It's still a little bit soft to it. So there's a little bit of give, but save waiting days and days. It says between 3 and 7 days for it to fully dry. So it's dry enough, I think. So this should be clear, or at least mostly clear. And if I keep doing the same thing, it's going to eventually become clear anyway, which is a good gradient to the water. So what I'm going to do now is pour. Now, unfortunately, gravity and the camera setting means you can't really see what's happening when I'm pouring. So I'm going to pour some over this side. Hopefully you can then see the effect that it's having. I'm then going to continue to pour around, basically getting it into most areas and around the back as well. Because it's a liquid, it will seep and give, so it will spread itself a bit. But I'm going to do some spreading in a moment as well anyway. So once I've got out all I can get out from here conveniently, that's about it. I'm going to be able to scoop some more out because of the shape of the pot and everything, and I'm going to use that to go into the places that I couldn't really get the pouring done. So I can dribble some of this down the front here. Around the other side here. Now this should be, say, pretty much transparent. So if I get it anywhere other than where it intends to be, it should dry as a liquid anyway. So it shouldn't matter. But what I'm going to do now is just give it a little bit of a touch and a nudge to get into the edges and the corners. For some reason it's not gone in there at all. That might be a little bit higher for some reason. Maybe my tray is not quite level. Let's see if I can't get another scoop out. There we go. To get into that corner there. And indeed, that corner over that side as well. So each level, even a cupful, doesn't actually make that much difference. It's gone, I don't know, 2 or 3 millimeters down in depth. And that I've got to leave for several more hours. This one I'll actually be leaving overnight. The other one I did, where are we, 5 or 6 hours ago. So it dried to a sort of tacky amount in 5 or 6 hours. But over the course of another 12 hours, it should dry even more. And obviously that will allow the bottom bit to dry a bit more as well. And it should start to build up over the next few days. Say a little bit at a time. I'm going to be going up to, you can't really see from the angle here, but that level, which is another probably an inch and a half further. So I'm going to end up with a couple of inches of depth. So hopefully it'll work okay. I need to get some in the middle there at the back. Hopefully without covering the engines yet, in case this does still have a tint to it. I'll be able to see what it does where it goes over these rocks here. You'll see there are some discolorations and little silvery specks in it that you can see now, I think, on camera. They are basically air bubbles that will hopefully disappear. They sort of bubble up and pop on their own. The resin that I'm using has some anti-gassing frequent facility to it that are basically helpful, hopefully will cure that. I can't do anything with torches or flamethrowers and things as I've seen done, because it's going to melt all my dioramas around. But that's basically all I can get out of this pot. I'm just going to again have a little nudge around and make sure it's settling where I want it to, not causing any strange lumps and bubbles. It looks like it's okay. It looks good to go. So I shall leave this to one side for, say, several hours overnight. Make sure nothing leaks out the sides and things like that. But that is getting there. So considering the depth now, I've probably done a quarter to a third of what I end up doing. So yeah, it's just coming back and doing that. Now, while that dries, I can't do a lot with it. I can't move it around too much. But I am going to be starting doing some of the background stuff in between layers. So probably next time you come back, I'll be doing some of that. So the background features. I want 3 things in the background. The first is going to be porgs. Now, this is my porg production line, where you can see just about some egg-shaped blobs of plaster. They will be painted much the same way that these are, to look a bit like porgs. They're very tiny. You can't see much, you can't do much detail with it, but I've added some colour to them in the porg variations, and even got some eyes on a couple of them, probably, maybe a little bit. So they will be spaced around the background. The more focal point is the little bit of clay crafting that I've been able to achieve in, I can't remember what it's called. It's a Thala-siren, apparently. It's the thing that Luke gets his milk from. So that I need to paint up. Now, I've got a picture of him in front of me here, and he's mainly a sort of bluey grey with a sort of the same, what's actually called wood in Vallejo Model Air, which I use for the porg eye surrounds, down the sort of belly and sort of pinky-ish sort of nose area as well there. So I'm going to get that painted up. The other thing that I have painted and created, I got Paul that glued to the sprue to print me off a figure which I'm going to use as Luke in his big long cloak. So that basically needs to be done in grey with a little bit of flesh tone for the face and things like that as well. So I need some greys. Now I'm going to use, I think for the main thing, I'm going to use a combination of dark ghost grey and grey blue, because the dark ghost grey is not quite right, and that will just lighten it up a little bit. So I'm going to mix these up just on a palette like I have here, and get them painted over the majority of this. I can go over the other bits with the other colours, that's not a problem. The cloak itself, I'm going to go for a darker grey just to get coloured in, and then some highlights, shading, shadows, things like that. Again, this is small tiny stuff that I can't really film doing. You wouldn't have seen me do that, for instance. I've got to get my head right in next to it. So yeah, I'll get these painted up and then show you what they look like, and then we'll see about putting them on the display and doing some extra effects to the cliff wall, some grass and greenery and stuff as well. As you can see, the resin level is rising. It's actually becoming mirror-like. You can actually see the reflection of my light strip in the water down there. I've just mixed up another batch, and this one I'm going to do something a little bit different. Every few layers I've been doing this, but I thought I'd show you this one live on camera. So I'm just mixing this up. Now you mix it up for a couple of minutes, as I said previously. It goes a little bit sort of cloudy, as you can see in the pot here, but that soon disappears once it's poured in. So I'm going to pour this in now and then add the secret ingredient. Let's just mix it up, make sure it's properly mixed in there, scrape around the edges, get all the bits from the bottom. Yep, so that's all good to go. I can pour this almost everywhere now. I can't quite go over the top of the X-wing, but it's getting very close to the time that I will be able to go there. Go around the edge, in the middle. That wing is going to get a little bit covered now as well, making sure I'm still getting stuff at the top and the front. So my secret ingredient now, I'm going to add a little bit more colour, but I don't want to make it completely opaque. So what I'm going to do is what I've done on a couple of other layers on this, is basically get some colour. I've used a couple of different blues, green and other things. I'm just putting a little bit down on there, so not even a drop. I just want a touch on the end of the stick here, and then you can see that it leaves a stripy line in there. Now I don't want a stripy line in there, so I'm going to mix that in the area, and it just discolours that area a little bit without leaving any obvious sort of paint streaks or anything, but it just makes it a little bit shady. So I'm going to do that there. Also going to do a bit over here as well, I think. So I think that this will just create a little interest point, add a little depth to it. Otherwise it's just going to be a solid clear resin. And water isn't completely clear all the way through. So hopefully that will make it just that little bit more unique, shall we say. Adding a little bit of something. Right, I'm going to mix up another little half a pot. I seem to do a pot and a half. This gives me a decent depth without it not wanting to dry very quickly. So that will be good. Then I'll leave that overnight, and in the morning I'll put another load down, and then tomorrow night I'll put another lot down, and that's probably going to be the complete lot. So it's getting there. You may notice I've got Luke standing up in the corner there. I still need to touch up and highlight him, but we're getting there. And that's the water all done, laid down. You can sort of see it at certain angles. At most angles it just looks transparent, which is the idea. I've also, as you may have noticed, added some colour. I've put some green on some of the tops of the cliffs. I will still be adding some proper textury grass to that in a bit. But first of all, I need to finish off the water. I'm going to be adding some of the transparent water gel to add some waves and things to there. But first of all, I need to get rid of some of this packing and surround. I don't know how well it's going to work. Let's find out. I'm going to sort of tear down through this, and hopefully it's going to come off nicely and look good. It's working. It's not perfectly transparent from the side, but it's, yeah, it's, I can't show you, but yeah, I'll get this packing off and then start putting down some more. Okay, that's removed a lot of that. Now, as you can see, it's not very nice on that side. I hoped it was going to be more like the top is, but it isn't. You can actually see some layers in there, which is quite interesting. It's obviously different drying times, and where I added some paint to some layers in different places. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to sort of polish this side down a bit, or if I'm just going to end up putting something across it to make it a top-down diorama. I might put a little wall across the front there to frame it, which I'm going to need to do something with these side pieces anyway. So I'll think about that as I go onwards. But let's start off with some water. If I can open the pot. Right, there we go. Now this is white in colour now, but it does dry clear, obviously. What I'm going to do is make up, because I don't need this to be perfectly flat. It does need to have some shapes and waves to it. And as well as having different effects to it to make it a little bit less boring. So to begin with, I'm just going to get some of this put across in a sort of line, because that's how waves work. Probably going to need more than that. Actually, definitely going to need more than that. But the plan is to do that, and then using an airbrush, I can spread it across a bit, which will give it more of a water effect, and hopefully dry nicely. What I'm going to do is do this little back corner to test and see how it works, and then assuming it works okay, I'll continue across the rest of it. So that's how I'm going to leave that corner. You can see some of it's gone a bit transparent, but it's covered almost all of the flat area. So I think that's how it's going to work. I'm going to build up some more bits of that once this has dried. But that's the plan so far going onwards. Now, the other thing you may notice, I've got the Luke standing up there. I've also painted my Thala-siren, which will be sitting on this ledge here. And I've got some more porgs up and ready to go. So once I've got some grass effects onto the ledges, they'll be added on. And yeah, it's coming together. That's what I like to see. So wait for this to dry, see how it looks, and then continue on, probably. The first bit started to dry and came through looking just as I'd intended, with the right ripple effects and things like that. So I've gone ahead and done the rest of it. Actually, there's a little bit there that isn't quite, so let's just add a little bit more squirty texture over that. So the white bit obviously again will dry transparent, but we'll have that effect of bending the light as it goes through it. I probably will come back and add a little bit more to a couple of places. I don't want it to be too uniform. I want it to have waves and splashes and things. And around the edges of the cliffs, I'm going to have some more sort of breakers and things like that. But I'll leave that to dry for a few hours and we'll see how it goes. And then come back and do that. And then there's one more water effect that I need to add, and then I can get to doing the rest of the top piece. Everything continues on. I'm waiting for the last level of water effects to dry on there. So I've been tidying things up a bit. I'm making a frame because the front of it doesn't look particularly nice. You can't really see it on camera angles, but yeah, the front of it doesn't look good. The water hasn't come through as clear as I thought it might with the tape in front. So I've cut out a piece of plastic card to stick on the front there to make it look a little bit more appetizing. So yeah, I've just been basically cutting it away. I need to sand it down, file it down, get rid of the rough edges from there. Then I shall be painting it in greys and blues to make it match a little bit better, and then affix it to the front. Now, in the next up, once that's dry, I've got to add the foam effects to it, but that's the last bit of the water to do. Then there's the grass effects and putting on the other extra pieces. So it's all coming together. It's just a waiting game now for drying. Now, while I'm waiting for the water effects to dry and go transparent, as it's still got some white bits in it, I can use that to my advantage while I'm adding the water foam, because it's actually dry enough that it's not moving around, and I can use the clear bits as an indication of where the high points are going to be, where this water foam effect, which actually dries white, is going to end up being. So I'm going to start adding some and I'll be able to add more and see how it looks with the once the other bits dried and gone transparent. But the tops of all the waves need some foam on them, because that's the way waves work. So I'm going to go around all of the edges, because that's going to be sort of breaking against the water, and adding in semi-random positionings, as well as the tops of the waves. So I'm just almost sort of dry brushing to feel where the tops are and getting a feel for that, because you can't always see it. So making a start on it. It's not going to be the final everything, but it's going to be a good indication. So I'm going to get all this done. There's not a lot more to be done on this now. It's getting to the point where things are starting to come together, which is always nice. I like it when a plane comes together. So yeah, things are going to be a little bit of sort of touching up here and there, adding some effects here and there, changing the way the effects break and adjust and things like that. So a little touches, and I shall see you shortly to see how it looks once it's transparent again. So there we have a framework built up to go around the front piece to make it look nicer. You'll be able to see it better in the pictures than I can ever show you on this video because of the size and the angles. But that's going to go on there like that, but not quite yet. That can go on there later. There's no rush to put that on there. Next up, I am going to be doing some effects to the little shelves, the greenery areas. Now, to begin with, I'm going to use some Citadel tufts. These are just little, it's a sheet of tufts in different sizes, which I can just stick on. They're self-adhesive, so using a small pair of tweezers, you can peel off one, like so, and that can just be put on wherever you need it to be, just like that. And that will create a better, more vertical grass than the way I'm able to put sort of the static grass down. So I'm going to put a few of these around, not many, just a couple here and there, a couple of bigger ones on bigger areas. Then I can get the grass laid down with some PVA glue, and then that's pretty much it. The water effects are coming along nicely. They're starting to dry, so I can see more where I need to put more of this white. The white pieces that you can see on there now are the foam effects that are doing exactly what they should do. So there's a few more little touches to put in here and there, but that's an ongoing process anyway. So tufts, grass, water, front frame, and we're done. And one of the final stages is the grass. Now I've got some of this, what's it called? Scatter Grass Spring Meadow, which is a very, very fine grass effect. So I'll be putting it down the same way as I did on the Scarif diorama, but a little bit more exacting, shall we say. I've got some PVA glue, which I shall be putting in place. Now what I'm going to do with this is actually put a blob in and use an old brush to spread it about to where I need it to be, instead of just putting it everywhere. So this is going to make it a little bit more exact where the grass ends up, because I don't want grass absolutely everywhere on this. So getting the PVA glue around, actually I'm going to take him out because I want him to be standing on the grass, not with the not in a patch of grass with it nowhere near him. So I'll put on a bit more. There we go, that'll do it. Up to the edges where I need it to be. Around the tufts that I've already put in. And that should do for that level. I'm not doing the rock because obviously I don't want the grass on the rocks. There we go, around a little bit further to the edge. And that should be that. And then I can just gently drop some of this in place. Now this is obviously quite bright, so hopefully the background of the darker green will help dull it down a bit. I will probably use some of the other grass that I've already got as well in patches to make it a little bit more, you know, variety, a little bit more subtle everywhere. But we'll see how that looks. Once it's done and dry, I can sort of shake off the excess and make it look better. But that's what I'm going to do here and on the other green areas. And once that's done, we'll be ready for final placing. I shall, once I've got the PVA on there as well, I shall be adding the occasional porg. And we'll see how it all looks afterwards. Oh, obviously I've got my other Thala-siren to add down the bottom there as well, which will also be attached with PVA glue. So a little bit of sticking to do, and then we'll see how it looks once it's dry. And there we have it. Pretty much as intended. The grass has come out as I wanted. The water's come out as I wanted. The little details here and there have come out as intended. So I'm happy with how it looks. I'll put some pictures up from different angles because, as I say, being the size and scale of it, you can't really see it on this camera from anything other than about there. But I'm happy with how that's come out. Do let me know in the comments below. And also, if you've got any other ideas for other films that or other Star Wars films particularly, that I could do dioramas from, that there are 144 version kits available. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed building it. I'll see you soon for the next one. Bye bye for now. Oh, there you go. I can wave from in here.